Hi Year 11. This video is designed to help you with understanding some of the life processes that bacteria have and that they use as they basically go about their daily business being a living thing. Now, when we talk about life processes, remember we're talking about our Mrs. Gren stuff, the whole movement, respiration, sensitivity, growth, reproduction, excretion, nutrition. Those are all the things that the vast majority of living things do, and bacteria are absolutely no different. The thing you need to be mindful of is that bacteria spend most of their time feeding and excreting. And that's important because if they're not feeding, they're not going to get a source of energy. And if they're not excreting, they're not going to be getting rid of some of the wastes that they make from basically being the living thing that they are. So when we start talking about their effects on other things, how a bacteria feeds and how a bacteria excretes become really important and have a link with some of the other life processes that they are involved in. Now, when we talk about bacteria and we talk about bacteria feeding, we describe bacteria as basically autotrophs or sometimes heterotrophs. So that depends on how the bacteria gets its food. If a bacteria is an autotroph, what it's doing is it's basically getting its food itself. It's basically making carbon dioxide and water and putting them together and turning that into glucose. So it's very similar. This is how plants get their food. And there are some bacterial species that do that. There are also some bacterial species that can do some really, really cool chemistry and do a version of that where they can basically take other chemicals and use those as a source of food. So they're what's called chemosynthetic bacteria, but you don't really end up dealing with those on a day-to-day basis. Um, Far more commonly are heterotrophic bacteria. So what they are doing is using food from other living things as their food source. So they very often will be feeding on another living thing, or in the case of things that are basically dead, they'd be feeding on decaying matter, and those are called basically decomposers or saprotrophs. So autotrophs make their own food, heterotrophs get their food from other living things, and there's a class of heterotrophs of which many bacteria are a member decomposer. They feed on basically organic matter and cause decay. How do they do that? How does a bacteria actually cause something to be broken down? If it ends up on your like cheese or like your sandwich, how would a bacteria end up doing that? And what essentially happens is a bacteria produces some enzymes onto the food, and that will begin to start breaking down that food into things that the bacteria can then use to basically get energy from. So that basically allows the bacteria to get a food source into itself, and then it can begin to basically break down that food source and get energy from it. And that process is called respiration.